The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Welcome back to the Nova Society, a space where dialogue deepens understanding and civic responsibility comes to life. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, joined by our regular panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon. Together, we'll unpack the stories that matter most, exploring the headlines, the history, and the big ideas shaping today's conversations. Let's dive in and hear what the panel has for us today. Today, we are again joined by our special guest, Dr. Stephen J. Ducat. Dr. Ducat is an author, political psychologist, psychoanalyst, and former psychology professor in the School of Humanities at New College in California. Dr. Ducat holds a doctorate from the Wright Institute in Berkeley, California. He completed his psychoanalytic training at the Psychoanalytical Institute of Northern California and holds licenses as a psychologist in both California and Oregon. He has a book, Hatreds We Love, The Psychology of Political Tribalism in Post-Truth America, that could be found on Amazon.com, and a Substack, Minding Politics, and that could be found at mindingpolitics.substack.com. And the Nova Society highly recommends checking out Dr. Ducat's work and supporting it. All right, Brooke, what do we got next?
Next we have a question from Roberta, who lives in Boulder, Colorado. And Roberta asks, I remember reading about the dynamics of group consensus and groupthink way back when I was in college. It seems to me that there are elements of both in Trump supporters. They have a consensus to follow him, but their overall ideology appears to lean more toward groupthink. Which does the panel think is at play here? Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you, Roberta, for your question.
Stephen, what do you think?
What do we think?
Well, Roberta, in my view, real consensus emerges from a respect for an airing of differences. And as we know, conservatives tend to be quite uncomfortable with difference, ambiguity, and complexity. Dissent from the leader, party, or the shared doctrine is viewed with great suspicion. So I would say, what is probably obvious to all of us here, that groupthink is far more operative in right-wing groups. And they're particularly moved by what sociologists call social truth. That's the phenomena whereby a truth claim is rendered more credible when it appears that most members of your tribe believe it to be true. And while Trump, I'm sure, has never heard of this notion, he makes use of it all the time, which is why he is so fixated on stories about polls and his rating at any given time. Of course, he lies about it, but the reason he lies about it, the reason he wants to present himself as wildly popular, even now, is because of that social truth phenomena. If he can convince his base that everyone else in the base thinks he's doing a great job, they are more likely to be moved to accept that, in fact, he is doing a great job.
And, we've seen groupthink before. I mean, the 2003 invasion of Iraq was a textbook case of groupthink in the W. Bush administration, and it in general doesn't usually lead to good outcomes. And I think that we're probably going to see that, and it's just kind of nerve-wracking to think where the next shoe might drop.
And part of what makes it such a dangerous process is that there is no room for debate. There's no room for second opinions, and doubt is banished. That's a recipe for disaster.
It's always been a truth that the world progresses and evolves because of progressives. There's always progress. Scott is a progressive, and I always say to him, Scott, you guys get used to losing a lot of battles, but you have the comfort of knowing you're eventually going to win the war, because the world will progress. I mean, it has to. It's almost like a Darwinian theory. You've got to evolve to meet the times. And my interest, of course, and the three of us here are more toward the sociology aspect of it. And when this came up, I got thinking that I know how I think Scott and Brooklyn and I would define groupthink and group consensus and its social and its interaction in the societal sector. From a psychological standpoint, though, what does the idea of this groupthink tell us about this electorate? Because I really do truly believe that we have to. He's bad. There's no doubt about that. But I really think we have to understand our fellow citizens that we interact with day in and day out, and what drives them, and where their minds are. So, from a psychological standpoint, what is this person that delves into this groupthink and this cult-like mentality? What should we be looking for? What are some of the signs that could be concerning?
Well,
I knew that was going to be a tough one.
Well, I mean, part of it is that you can't always. I mean, it's not like a skin rash, you know. Oh, I think you have the measles. Oh, no.
It's not like you got a pox.
Yeah, it is a pox in its own way, but not a visible one. Well, first of all, again, I am always arguing for differentiation and complexity, and that not everybody is equally vulnerable to groupthink. And groupthink, in many ways, is a synonym for conservative psychology, really. As I've said earlier, I mean, they value intra-tribal loyalty and homogeneity much more so than do liberals. Liberals are interested in difference. They, as I said before, novelty excites them. They want to hear other opinions. But, and we can observe this behavior just looking at Republicans in power. I mean, how often have you been dumbstruck by Republicans using the exact same language on newscasts? I mean, it's almost as if they all sat in a room and decided, okay, these are the words we are going to utter today. But they are acutely attuned to one another. They are acutely aware of their group as different from and their view superior to others. So there is a psychological bias towards uniformity, towards conformity, and so I think whether you're talking about the psychology of groupthink or the sociology of groupthink, it's about whether you're using a microscope or a macroscope or a telescope. I mean, you're looking at the phenomena with different degrees of detail, but it's the same phenomena.
Right.
And so I think it's just a synonym for all the things that we've been talking about.
Can one differentiate the internal and external loci? I guess that's the plural of locus, the locus of control. Mm-hmm. Is that separate from what we're talking about, or what you're discussing, Stephen, or not?
Well, the locus of control is a psychological notion that attempts to explain agency. The experience of oneself as somebody who can act on the world and produce outcomes. So there are people who have external locus of control. Like, I feel helpless. I can't really do anything to control my fate. It's in the hands of the gods, the leaders, whatever. That's called an external locus of control. Internal locus of control is the sense that people can have that they are the determinants of their lives, that they're the ones who create outcomes. That doesn't mean they necessarily do it as isolated individuals. You can do it as part of a coalition. And so to have, kind of political power to a certain extent, you have to believe in your own internal locus of control. Then it gets even more complicated. You can feel like depressed people, for example, can feel like they have, an internal locus of control over everything that's bad. In other words, that they are the creators of everything bad in their world. Whereas other people are prone to feel like they're victims. Like everything that's bad is a result of what somebody else is doing to me, of outside forces. And so, it's a term of art that, mainly it is a way of talking about human agency. And it applies both, on an individual level and a political level.
And when you combine it with a dislike of ambiguity and low, basically low power distance and a bunch of other sort of cultural dimensions, it creates this incredible movement toward we need a strong father figure. And we can't exist without it. And Trump somehow or another fits that. I'm still flabbergasted by why anybody who spends as much time on hair and makeup as he does is considered a masculine man. But that seems to be what they were looking for.
Yeah. I mean, I think about, this relates to, thinking about Trump as an idealized cult figure. It has always been a challenge for me to get in, to put myself in the mind of MAGA, because Trump seems like such a charmless, humorless, obnoxious, puerile individual that anybody could idealize him is just mind-boggling.
Don't hold back, Stephen. Tell us what you really think.
And it's like picturing him with Rambo's body or as a superhero or any of those things. Yeah, right. Kind of fetishizes him for the base.
And this is kind of to me this is kind of interesting. Brooke, you brought up a really good point, and I believe it was Julian Rotter that came up with locus of control. Did I get that right? Yeah, I think it was Rotter.
Could be.
Yeah, I think it was Rotter. And again, Trump sees every time you listen to Trump, he's the victim. So why would the rest of his followers believe that he's, as Scott says, the strong individual when he is constantly the victim of things that, according to locus of control, are based on luck or fate or something else outside of his control? And how do they justify that? How do they make that work?
Well, there you're talking about cognitive dissonance. How do you deal with something that's so evidently contradictory? And, this is one of the things that again, is a psychological trait of the conservative electorate, is their ability to numb themselves to contradiction. You can see it in their fundamentalist religious beliefs. You can see it in their idolatry of somebody so obviously damaged as Trump, that they have an ability to numb themselves to contradiction and hypocrisy. They don't experience it. I mean, it's part of their aversion to complexity, and that as Trump says, don't believe what you read, don't believe what you're hearing, just listen to me.
But how does it work when they're actually feeling it, Stephen? I mean, so, okay, he says, well, you got $1.98 gas prices. Well, I haven't seen one yet. The proclamations that he makes are so off the wall that real people, when you know it, it's in the physical reality of when I go to the gas station, I'm not handing anybody $1.98 for gasoline. How does that how does that, and I understand the cognitive dissonance, but when reality, when true reality of life hits you in the face, how do they ignore that? Is there a psychological reason or a diagnosis that says, well, okay, these people are just funky that way? I don't know.
Well, and not everybody ignores it. I mean, I think that, part of what we are seeing is that, you can get people to act against their own self-interest up to a certain point. And everybody has a sort of a different threshold. Everybody on the right, in this case, has a different threshold for when their individual and familial survival is being threatened by their idolatry of Trump and tribal loyalty to MAGA. Everybody has a different threshold. So part of what we are now seeing is these fissures within MAGA. And it's hard to know where it's going to go. This obedience, the hypnotic trance, whatever you want to call it, is beginning to unravel. It's beginning to fall apart. So,
and that's because mostly because of Epstein, because one of the myths that they had surrounding Trump was that he was going to team up with, get this, Robert Mueller, and then even more bizarre, JFK or JFK Jr. And to the point where people were waiting at the book depository in Dallas for them to come back.
Yeah, you're talking about the QAnon thing.
Yeah, but QAnon was like the edge of it. A little bit more as you move more into the middle, what you get is a lot of people thinking that the elites are involved in these horrific sex trafficking rings, and that Donald Trump is going to be the one who busts that up. And as it turns out, Donald Trump is one of them. And they still seem to be, I believe, in denial about this, but a 45-year-old man who has nothing to do with beauty pageants or modeling agencies going out and all of a sudden buying a beauty pageant and starting a modeling agency for young girls should have been a sign that he was involved in this. And people are still in denial about it, but it's getting harder and harder to deny it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think that the kind of democratic international Jewish pedophile conspiracy linked with all manner of figure, George Soros, Jeffrey Epstein, this was MAGA catechism for a long time. The whole Pizzagate thing. And so now I think QAnon and people adjacent are in a crisis of faith, because in a way there was a real conspiracy, not a delusional conspiracy theory, but a network of people working together, and many of them turned out to be the people they revere, like Donald Trump. So yes, this is producing a serious crisis of faith, and I think and as we've seen upstream from Marjorie Taylor Greene's defection. Not so much completely from MAGA, but certainly from Trump.
Now, I don't have much insight into this, but one of our classmates at Nova, when we were going to school there, told me what he was studying was the phenomenon in rural America, small towns in the South and the Midwest, where it was an open secret that incest and child sex and even animal sex were going on, and that as long as the perpetrator came to Jesus, they were forgiven and brought back into the community, at least until they struck again. And he said they assume that because they're doing it, you're doing it. We're doing it. The people who live on the coasts and the people who live in big cities. And the only difference between us and them is that we do not find Christ and we do not go back to Jesus and pray for forgiveness. And that makes them more moral than we are.
Yeah. Pretty wacky. But true.
Scott likes to mention the South a lot because he knows I live in South Carolina now. So.
And most of his neighbors are into bestiality, and with underaged animals.
Yeah, you always want consent from your sheep, right?
Absolutely. But you know, projection seems to be a big part of what they do, right? And this is a classic case of projection.
Absolutely, yeah, very much. And if you're in South Carolina, just be careful of what anyone slips in your Mountain Dew, okay?
And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We want to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing team, Apple Podcasts, the largest source of podcast and music online, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your destination for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. And most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society could not be possible. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing on the platform of your choice. It's easy, it's free, and helps our channel grow. For questions or comments, you can reach us at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So on behalf of Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershworth, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power of society is knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Sciences, the JICS. This open access journal, double peer-reviewed, provides a platform for emerging scholars to publish their work and engage in meaningful dialogue across disciplines. The JICS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis and is published through the NovaWorks Scholarly Repository at Nova Southeastern University. You'll find a link to the journal in our episode description.